that people who are suffering or who have suffered in silence will not have to suffer the same kind of agony I've gone through. Now, while we were thinking about, I was thinking about this occasion, unlocking dyslexia hidden talent, embracing the power of strength. I've sat back to reconsider what dyslexia is, and I'm not a medical or medical professional or skilled in this area, but it's interesting to really know that it's a developmental disorder, and to what extent would I say it's my fault or is the fault of someone who suffers from this? And these are the questions I want us to raise, because we live in a very religious society. I mean, apart from the fact that, being an African, Nigerians, we're quite religious. And when you find a child who is not living up to the expectations of parents, they forget the fact that there is an order of probability that certain development didn't take place in a child's life, or certain things, on that conveyor belt of life didn't come with the child. There's a defect, there's something just wrong, and we need to raise that awareness that there is no demon or evil around somebody with difficulties in learning, or difficulties in reading, or difficulties in understanding how things are ordered in a particular situation. Because the default position is that people take to saying to themselves that, hey, look, something here is wrong because the devil is at work in the person's life, or somebody has done something wrong, and that's why they have these problems. And in that advocacy, I think we need to derive and devise ways to let people know that within the midst of all that, there are very strong skills. There are things that we don't see, because what we don't do or are unable to do in a particular way, we get compensated through a different strength. And just as I said, that I tend to find things a lot easier when I make them, when I modularize them and put them into categories, and then take them one after the other in a logical sense that allows me to get them done properly. And because of that, more often than not, I'm quite detailed when it comes to dexterity, when it comes to doing things with my hands, because everything tends to be boxed up in such a way that one success of the end of an activity tells me that the next one is about to begin, or the next one should begin, and so on. And that has helped me through the life of entrepreneurship, because when I recall telling someone that I was going to start a TV channel in Nigeria, and they said, just you, I said, yes. How are you going to do this? And I sat down to speak about the whole range of activities I was going to undertake. And I said, how are you going to do this? And I said, well, I don't know, but somehow I'm going to figure it out. And somehow I did, from doing a business plan to understand what the market is all about, understanding people, understanding culture, understanding just about everything you want to do in business. How do you put the creative together? How do you put people together? How do you string along the skills that you want your staff to have and all that? And within a period of time, from one activity to the other, I was able to sew this up, to the extent that the product in the end was quite an amazing thing to watch, to say, hey, how did we get this done? And that is the power we have. And that's why we've been very successful. Many of us, 40% of entrepreneurs and innovators are dyslexic. we tend to dovetail into being people who are obsessive in just having an order, because once order is not established, we then get distracted. And that's the kind of person I am as well. I'm unable to read when there's clutter because I don't see order, and because of that, um, it it allows us to just be, would I say, have clarity, have cleanness around us because of the fact that things have to be in a particular way for us to get things done um, in the ways that we want to achieve our objectives. Um, but then, I'm just one example of someone who has lived through this and discovered his inner strength. How do we help others who haven't been able to uh, uh, get to this point? And I'm happy that someone like Bernard, uh, by chance, was able to get help. How do we take away probability and make it how do we increase the probability rather of people not only uh, discovering by chance, but by deliberate attempt to really say, how do we test people about this? We all get vaccinated as kids in Nigeria. Why can't we get tested for our inabilities? Why does it have to be visible before we can say it's a disability? What should be done? How much more can we do? What kind of training do we need to give educators? What do we need to tell parents? I mean, I've had kids, I have two boys, and on two occasions, my wife has had to be tested for Down syndrome early on to check if a child will be afflicted by that. Why can't we check early on to see if a child is afflicted by dyslexia? Why can't we provide a template for employers? Because if I had to go for an interview to do the things I've done, I would have been rejected based on the fact that I will be quite incoherent on certain tasks during the interview. How do we tell employers to identify these things? And if I had identified my situation early enough, perhaps I would have had more time to write my exams in school without having to muddle up, rush, or be under pressure. And because I was always under pressure when it came to all trying to do things within the time frame, because they are all tasks that get impeded by the fact that in carrying them out, our disabilities tend to weigh us down. We haven't got the time and luxury to say, oh, I'm going to put this in a particular order because an examination question paper is in a particular order that you cannot reorder. How do we help educators to understand how to do this so that people who are dyslexic can achieve their best and greatest potential as students, as scholars, and not being left to chance of having a good day or a bad day. And then how do we make this situation not shameful? Because I don't know what my friends would now think of me now that they know that I'm dyslexic. Would they say, well, everything you've achieved is luck, or privilege, or what would they say now? So how do we make this not a stigma? Because when it comes to learning or ability to learn things, once you're backward, you are seen to be of no value because you are seen to be a time waster. How do we change that whole thinking that somebody who's dyslexic is not a time waster. How do we then provide a situation of celebrating those who have achieved things within that space? And this is what I think that a forum like this should address, so that when recommendations are being made, there's a lot more clarity on how to deal with issues like this. And of course, how do we help people? What kind of technologies are available that we can deploy to help people? What kind of methods can we provide in the school, in the workplace, most especially for those who are dyslexic? What can we do? Because here I am, and as I sit here and I speak to you about these things, I'm asking myself, had I been Bernard, and Bernard being me at News Central, would I have had the opportunity of really blossoming with the task I had had before me? And I dare to say no, because workplace hasn't had a chance to think about how do we create an enabling environment for people who are in this situation. And unfortunately, because I hadn't figured out my own situation, I couldn't provide that kind of space for people. And I'm sure today there are so many CEOs in Nigeria who have no clue about their own situations, who are very quiet about the fact that they have disabilities, inability to read coherently, who will scream and bark at their subordinates because they didn't quite understand the text, the syntax, the stringing of sentences in the document, and misunderstand the way a dyslexic staff is thinking. So how do we bring all this awareness to people? Because it's not a shameful thing, but it's a thing that people will need support for. And I think that there's an area there of work and possibility that needs to be pursued. And in conclusion, and I'm going to have so many slides concluding this end of my talk. Indeed, there's inner strength in all of us, and ours is unique in the sense that we connect or we complement what other things that we don't have, and because of that, it's a huge talent. So if you have someone who is who is left-handed, he complements somebody who is right-handed, so it then tells you that that's a meeting point. But it's a very good meeting point in our case, because we do the things that are kind of like unfathomable by someone who is seen to be normal, and that is a unique point that should be celebrated, encouraged, and nurtured. And here, I'm sharing an image here, which talks about the genius within us as people who are dyslexic. And the other success stories among people like us. And in conclusion, I would like to commend Dyslexia Nigeria for making a real difference, and not only making the real difference, but also promoting and advocating this situation to the public, and bringing out the truth about a situation of this kind from me, out of me to to speak about it proudly, because you cannot underestimate how much this would change the life of somebody else, because inability can be a source of would I say fright, can be a source of discouragement, can be a source of so much that people would deny themselves great opportunities because they think they cannot do it. And I commend Dyslexia Nigeria and also commend my invitation. And I want to say thank you for listening to me.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Tonidara. Could you unshare your screen now, kindly?
Yes, I think I have. I haven't shared my screen.
Okay. If everybody can hear me, thank you so much once again, Mr. Tonidara. We apologize for the, as a broadcaster, I'm used to saying this, we apologize for the break in transmission, but sometimes these things do happen with technology. We would do our best to ensure that it is seamless and smooth. If everybody can hear me again, once again, thank you so much, Tony, for sharing your experiences, your life experiences with struggling with dyslexia. Some of what you said, I'm sure most of us can relate. I certainly can relate with a lot of what you said. I have stories for days, and a good number of them are similar to what you said. I'll quickly share one as we move on. While I was in university, it was then I began to notice that I had certain challenges, like some of what you mentioned, cognitive challenges, difficulty in reading, but then I knew I was one of the smart ones as well. And then upon graduation, well, I didn't come out with as favorable a result as I would have wanted. And then openly, one of my lecturers said something a bit derogatory to me in Yoruba language in front of the students. You know, he said, Bernard, in English, it means, you know, you're a dullard. We thought you were brilliant, but you're quite a dullard. And I felt very bad. But fast forward several years, I began working as a broadcaster and posting some of my work on social media. And then guess who comes to my Facebook to say, oh, Bernard, we're so proud of you. The department is proud of you. The university is proud of you. I was going to respond. I had words for him. But then I thought, what would Jesus do? So I let it slide. But once again, Tony, thank you so much for sharing these words of encouragement. And just before we go on, I also like to say to some of the questions that you were asking, you know, probably rhetorical questions, how, you know, Nigeria and how people can actually help dyslexics to overcome their challenges. I believe that's exactly what Dyslexia Nigeria is trying to achieve with today's program, unlocking dyslexia's hidden talents and embracing the power of strength. And I believe at the end of today, a lot of that will be achieved and will certainly be done so that we don't only focus on the downsides of dyslexia. We don't just look at the challenges, which are very evident, but we also are able to help dyslexics, whether children or adults, harness the strengths and the potential that they have eventually. Once again, thank you so much, Tony, for sharing those words. We'll move on quickly, straight to our first panel session now, and I'll introduce the panel moderator. The panel moderator is Kiton Bankole, and Kiton is a seasoned professional with a diverse background in advertising and public relations, specializing in corporate communications. She has accrued 7 years of expertise in the realms of experiential marketing and showbiz, building an impressive career. Her insatiable thirst for knowledge has led her to cultivate a wide range set of interests spanning data science, philanthropy, copywriting, integrated marketing, communications, television broadcasting, book publishing, and sales. In addition to her professional accomplishments, Keaton thrives as a compere, demonstrating exceptional hosting entertainment skills. During her leisure hours, she manages an e-commerce venture, combining her entrepreneurial spirit with creative acumen. Beyond the professional arena, she finds joy in travel, possesses a discerning appreciation of movie reviews, and dedicates time to the art of dance. Embracing life's vibrant experiences, Keaton continually seeks to expand her horizon, and quite a large horizon she has already. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to bring forth Keaton Bankole, who will be our first panel moderator. Thank you, Keaton.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I wasn't sure that you'll be reading my profile because now I'm shy. Although I'm not the star of today, we have four phenomenal women here with us, and I can assure each and every one of us that we're about to have a very robust conversation. But before I read the panelists' profiles, I'd like us to do something. During the keynote speech, Mr. Dara said something. He said that you're not sure who you're helping. So I need everyone to just take a minute or two to share the link to this session. Okay, this dialogue is important. You're not sure who's going to benefit from it. You don't know who needs it the most. So let's just take a minute or two. All right. I hope everyone can do that very, very quickly. Okay, I will do that as well, lead by example and all that. So just share it. I've shared it before, so I'll share it again. This is a very important conversation, and I really hope that each and every one of us can just share with someone. WhatsApp groups, Twitter, that is X now, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram stories, and on every platform, your parents' groups, your friend groups, and everything. All right, you're welcome once again. Today is going to be an amazing time. If this is your first time joining us, you're welcome. If this is your second or third time, you're an OG. So yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so this first panel is titled "Identifying and Nurturing Dyslexic Strengths: Recognizing and Developing the Unique Talents and Abilities of Individuals with Dyslexia." We're just going to explore the unique strengths and abilities that dyslexic children possess. So this first panel is focused on children. Okay, so we have four panelists, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll be introducing them very briefly. Also, because of time, we will be taking all questions after the session. We have about 10 minutes allotted to questions and answers. So if you have questions during the dialogue, please keep them. You can post them through the forum there. Okay, so the first person I'll be introducing is Joy Thomas, who is the MD and founder of Dyslexia Ghana. She is a member of the British Dyslexia Association and the British Psychological Society, providing face-to-face online services to adults and children. She specializes in assessment and support for dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and dysgraphia. If you're confused, don't worry. I promise we would get to all of these terms during the conversation. Okay. The next person I'll be introducing is Melanie Breather. Melanie Breather is the founder of Decoding Dyslexia. She's a resource teacher from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, who, by the way, recently celebrated 20 years in the classroom. So congratulations, Melanie. She's an advocate for dyslexia awareness and the science of reading. Yes, reading is a science. Her deep commitment to this cause was sparked by her son Benjamin's dyslexia diagnosis at the age of 9, which ignited a personal mission to understand dyslexia and support her son and her students. Motivated by her son's journey, Melanie embarked on extensive research and training, achieving Orton Gillingham Associate Level certification and becoming a CERI structured literacy teacher. Her expertise equips her with the knowledge to address dyslexia effectively. Thank you so much, Melanie, for doing this. You're most welcome. Okay, next up, we have Jeanette Robez. Jeanette, are you here? Okay, she is. Okay, so Jeanette Robez is the founder of Barely Articulated. That is Bearly, Barely Articulated. Interesting name, by the way. She has worked as both a speech language pathologist and a software engineer. So for those of you thinking, oh, how can tech help my kids? Don't worry, it's all part of the conversation. Jeanette is the author of Technical Difficulties, why dyslexic narratives matter in tech, and the Speech Language Pathologist's Guide to Dyslexia. She is certified in 4 literacy programs steeped in the structured literacy method. Jeanette has spoken in over 40 countries and has earned recognition in the Washington Post and US News and World Report, among other professional acknowledgements. You're welcome, Jeanette. It's great to have you here. And finally, and definitely not the least, we have a strong, amazing woman by person of Lovette Singleton, who is a dyslexia advocate. Lovette is a Nigerian by birth and a US American by nationality. She's a diplomat with the US Department of State by day and a full-time dyslexia advocate all the time. As a mother of a brilliant dyslexic currently living in the 8th country and 4th continent, wow, over the last 16 years, Lovette has gained valuable insights on the topic of dyslexia as it applies to diverse cultural and academic conditions. Lovette is a curious learner, an avid reader, and an adventurous traveler with a passion for writing. Lovette is married to her beloved spouse and is a devoted mother to 2 children. Thank you so much, Lovette. So everyone, let's give a virtual round of applause to our 4 super phenomenal panelists as we're about to start the conversation. Okay, so to get started, when I was reading Joy Thomas's profile, I mentioned 4 terms, and I'm sure some people might have been a bit confused. I said dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and dysphagia. So, Joy, could you please just explain, just define the 4 terms and, the similarities, different, just tell us about them. Joy, you're muted. Could you please unmute? Okay.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good morning, everybody. It's just a pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for having me today as one of the panelists. Yes, dyslexia, well, dyscalculia is when you have problems with maths, calculations. So dyscalculia is when you have problems with maths. Dyslexia is when you have problems with words and spelling. And dyspraxia is when you have problems with your coordination. And dysgraphia is writing, when you have problems with writing. So I normally say I specialize in the 4Ds. Because not everybody is just dyslexia. You might be dyslexia, you might have problems with the words and spelling, and then also have problems with maths. And some people have problems with writing, and some people have problems with coordination. I mean, I've had children who've got all four, and there's others who have maybe just dyslexia. Some people have 2, some people have 3. I personally have coordination, dyspraxia, and dyslexia. And when it comes to maths, I think I'm very good on maths. But when it comes to reading and spelling, I need help. So yes, that's my yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for that clarity. I think now we can see that they're not the same. Sometimes children have both, all 1 or 2, but they're not quite the same. Melanie, I'll be coming to you now. You're a seasoned educator. 20 years is a very long time. I mean, that's an entire adult, so you've raised adults, basically. Understanding these 4 terms, or let's focus on dyslexia as it is. What are the early signs? How do you identify without a proper test? How do you instantly, quickly identify dyslexia in children in your classroom? What's the first telling sign?
Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Well, I'm a parent also of a child with dyslexia, and I did not know what I know now. I feel that teachers need to be educated in the signs of dyslexia and how to help our students and our children as well. So because it's a language-based disability, we can see signs early on, even before they start reading and writing. And I think if I knew all this early on, I could have helped my son. I live in Quebec, Montreal, Quebec, Canada. So we are learning two languages, French and English. And as a parent, I always thought, well, maybe it's because he's learning a second language. That's why he's having difficulty. And so this is something that, if you have dyslexia, you're going to struggle in both languages. Where if it's just one, it's language acquisition, just, you're having difficulty. So early on, it's because of 70 to 80% of people who have dyslexia have a phonological deficit. So they have a difficulty with spoken language, phonemes, the sounds of language, playing and manipulating the sound structure of our language. So for example, when your child, having difficulty rhyming, for example, bat, cat, sat, they have a really hard time with that. Manipulating and playing with sounds. So if you say, can you say cat, but don't say k and at. Just you can see those signs early on. Having difficulty, I remember when my son started kindergarten, he still had difficulty writing his name. He couldn't remember the letters in his name. And his name is, he always would write Ben, it's Benjamin, but he would always write Ben because it was easier. And every time we tried to practice Benjamin, he would have difficulty with that. But learning the letter names and sounds was very difficult for him. But I kind of brushed it aside, saying, well, you know what, he's learning two languages. And that was definitely something that if I knew that now, it's definitely a red flag. So there's lots of red flags that you can see early on. And those are some of them. Just even counting the sounds. I know that I'm a teacher also, so I have that background. I don't know if parents necessarily will ask their child to, how many sounds do you hear in the word bat or at, but it's just they can't really distinguish the sounds. But that's for 70 to 80% of our children have difficulty with that phonological awareness.
Okay, thank you so much, Melanie. Okay, so as a follow-up question to that, Jeanette, this is for you because I think you're the best person to answer this. One of the most common ways people think they can help kids, with the learning, the writing and spelling is telling them to sound it out, sound it out, sound it out. So does that actually help, or does it create pressure that just worsens it? Does it help really? And just tell us about that.
Thank you for your question, and hello everyone. Again, I'm Jeanette. So to answer your question, does the repetition of the teacher telling the student, just sound it out, is that effective as a means of teaching them the sound? So I think we have to look at the systemic issues when it comes to the pre-service teaching programs. A lot of teachers are not taught how to explicitly teach phonemic awareness, phonological awareness. So when they're in the classrooms and they're kind of shoving this information to the students are not necessarily getting it. You can tell me something 6 or 7 times, but if I don't understand it the first time, on the 6th time, there will be no difference. So I think what we need to look at is creating better pathways for teachers to be educated on the science of reading, on structured literacy, so that when they're in those classrooms and they're talking about those very important speech sounds, they're able to break it down to each and every student where they are. Because we know that when our students start school, they're all on different levels. As we heard from Melanie, her child was learning couple languages. So that child is coming to the table with some different experiences. And as educators, it's very important that we are equipped to meet our students where they are and not just shoving and pushing information down their throats and expecting them to get it at some point.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Just out of curiosity, Lavette, before I get to because I know that we have a particular set of questions that I must address, but we have parents here, we have teachers, educators. It's a very mixed audience we're addressing right now. So I want to ensure that we're covering all the bases. Lavette, you're well-traveled. You've lived in so many countries, in about 8 countries, yeah. So the question I have for you is, does dyslexia operate the same way in lettered writing and in symbolic writing? For example, when someone is writing in Arabic, you're not using letters as it is, you're using symbols. Same thing with is it Aramaic, or what are they speaking? The way the Jews write, So is it the same? Is it the same way it affects people who use lettered writing, like in English, French, Spanish, and the same way it affects them in symbolic writing? So is it the same or is it different?
Yeah, research actually shows that, regardless of the language, regardless of the symbols that one uses to learn literacy, a dyslexic person is a dyslexic person in China, in Israel, in any of the Arab-speaking countries where they have this non-Latin alphabet. So yeah, it does cut across. And regardless of the language being learned, dyslexia does affect 20% of the population, period. And
Okay,
similar to Melody, in my situation, my son was diagnosed at 9, and it was also the same thing. We lived in Morocco at the time, and he was going to a trilingual school. So it was French, Arabic, and English. And when he started to struggle, we all said the same thing. Oh, it's the language thing, it's 3 languages. And then we moved to Greece after that. And he was in a British school. It was 1 language, it was English. And for the first year, they had him in a remedial English language class because they also thought it was the trilingual factor. But then after 1 year of being in extra English language every day, there was no improvement. And that's when we actually started to suspect it was not just the confusion of languages, basically. So then we got him assessed, and we got the DSM code for dyslexia for him. So yeah, it can be a tricky one if you're in a place that speaks multiple languages, or your child is in a school with multiple languages.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Back to you, Jeanette. This question is for you. So when attempting to diagnose dyslexia in a child, we're in Africa, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of African parents, especially the moms, are in denial. Thankfully, Mr. Dara has said that dyslexia is not a disability, it's a difficulty. So we cannot say, oh, they're necessarily, they're not stupid, they're not retarded. No, they're not, it's just a difficulty. They're still as smart and as competent as anyone else. But when you mention it to a parent, the first thing that comes to my mind is, God forbid, my child is not, they're so in denial about it. So just to put parents at ease, could you just tell us what the test is like? Going through the diagnosis, what's it like to test a child for dyslexia?
Great question. So first and foremost, I will say that one of the precursors to dyslexia is delayed speech, okay? As a speech language pathologist, that's one of our markers. We see that and we're immediately concerned. So when it comes to having that conversation with parents, it's important to kind of have reverse psychology a little bit. So you don't want to immediately point out the deficits and come from that deficit model, but you want to see exactly what the parent sees. So for instance, you may start a conversation and say, have you noticed that this or that is happening? Or, ask questions about what's going on at home as it relates to that child's speech and their language. So once the parent is able to say, yeah, I have noticed that, or once they provide you with information that kind of confirms your suspicions, so to speak, then you would go through a screening process first. So the screening process is not an actual test. It's more of a checklist of sorts to see if there are other characteristics that fall into line with that dyslexia diagnosis. And you mentioned the African context, which is interesting because currently I am in Windhoek, Namibia. And so being here, I'm seeing that there is a lot of misinformation around characteristics, markers, benchmarks for speech and language. So I would say start with a free screener that is online. They have virtual screeners, and I can follow up and put a few in the chat if necessary. But if you notice that there are tons of ticks and checks, then it needs to go to the next level. It needs to be escalated. And when it comes to assessments, you want to make sure you are getting assessed by an educational psychologist, someone who is vetted, someone who knows their way around different psychometric assessments and tests, because you don't want to fall into a trap where you hire someone to assess or test your child, or even get recommendations from someone who has not themselves gone through a training program that is rigorous and that has provided them with experience and expertise in this area. That's one thing I can certainly say that I have seen. There are a lot of people who say that they are familiar and aware and have these legitimate credentials, but it could certainly be false. So you want to be mindful of who you are seeking and talk to people who may have had similar experiences so you can get recommendations. Being here is a great first step for a lot of parents because they are in the presence of a lot of experts, a lot of individuals who have been down that road and who can provide some substantial recommendations.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So if you're a parent listening and you've been worried about what it's like, you see, it's just a checklist. So please, if you're worried or if someone has maybe subtly said it to you or suggested it to you, maybe their teacher or in my case, the librarian, please, you can just do the diagnosis. So, I didn't mention that in my case, it was my high school librarian that told me that I could be dyslexic because I would spend hours and hours reading very short storybooks. It was a whole thing. Okay, so moving on. Back to Joy. There's this huge debate, or not such a huge debate in psychology about nature versus nurture. So my question is, what role does that play in dyslexia in children?
That's an interesting question. It's a good question. Yeah. Nature versus nurture. Well, as we all know, we all not the same. We all born, well, as a dyslexic or a dyslexic thinker, as I like to call myself these days, a dyslexic thinker. There are no one particular dyslexic is the same as the other person. Some people, obviously, through nurturing, through schooling and through nurturing and through their parents, have got a very positive nature to themselves. So they approach things differently. And then also you find, well, we all born with, sorry, I'm a bit disorientated at the moment, sorry. We are born with being dyslexic, I'll say. And so we are born naturally, we are born being dyslexic. It's something that you didn't acquire when you are on this earth. But well, it depends on how you are nurtured and how you are cared for. That would actually determine whether you have a positive image of yourself or a negative image, and how you receive things when you are taught and when you don't receive things when you are taught. When you have the closest that I've come to understanding dyslexia, I'll say, is Davis' way of describing dyslexia, whereby when you're orientated, which just now I was saying I was disorientated because I was getting things a bit muddled up, and then put myself back in place. And when I'm orientated, I'm now beginning to make sense of what I'm saying. So if, say, a child is disorientated and they see things differently, and most dyslexics, I'll say, we see things in symbols. And so if you can't get a picture of what you're seeing, then you find that you're a bit confused. When you're confused, then your mind is not obviously receiving what your eyes are seeing or your ears are hearing. Then you're a bit disorientated. But when you're orientated, then things are a bit more clear and you can understand what is going on. Sorry, I'm deviating a bit from, I think, what your question is.
Okay.
Sorry. when you are when you've had a chance to be nurtured in your life, or the experience of being nurtured, everything seems to fall into place for you when you are learning. And when, sorry.
I really agree with what she's saying. I totally agree with what Dr. Joy is saying. You know, it's researchers proven that dyslexia is a nature thing for sure. It affects people across cultures, you know, regardless of your community, how you were nurtured, regardless of class, race. It is definitely nature. 20% of the people are born that way. But then to what she said, nurture determines how far or how well a person ends up using their skills as a dyslexic. You know, there's statistics out there somewhere that says about 40% of people in prison actually show signs of dyslexia. On the other hand, you also have 40% of entrepreneurs who are also dyslexic. So with that skill, it's easy to go one way or the other. However you want to look at it, you know, the person who is going to jail, maybe doing criminal things, are actually using entrepreneurial-like skills as well, to just in the wrong way. Yeah, so nature plays a role in how you establish yourself as a, nurture plays a role in how you establish yourself as a dyslexic, but nature definitely is the main pointer for where dyslexia comes from.
Okay,
thank you very much.
so much.
Thanks. Yeah, that's
Okay,
exactly what I was
you.
trying to say, but trying to get the words and things.
No, you got it right. I was just expanding on what
You actually got it
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for the collaborative answer. I like it. I like it anyway. Okay, so I think at this point, everyone on the call, in the conversation, understands what dyslexia is, how to identify it in children, you know, the early markers and things like that. So we're going to get to the heat of today, or to the main, you know, the main reason why we're here, the strengths. So the first question will go to you, Melanie. How can educators and parents work together to identify the unique strengths and talents of dyslexic children in the early stages of their education?
Well, I think as teachers, you know, we obviously have many different subjects, hopefully, you know, different clubs and activities at school to encourage children to try different things. My son has amazing spatial intelligence. Like, he was always fantastic at puzzles. He can actually make mosaics out of Rubik's cubes. I know that sounds a little unique, but he has just an amazing talent and hobby. And I would have never have known that if we, you know, didn't have one Rubik's cube or a similar cube at home. So I think as teachers and parents, we need to collaborate, because school is difficult day in and day out. I can speak for my own son. I would say he's severely dyslexic, and going every day to school and doing something difficult takes a toll on them, right? The mental health piece, I don't know if we always talk about that, but it's huge for our kids. And as parents and teachers, because I wear both hats, you know, just to be able to collaborate. If we see a child having, you know, a really difficult time, we need to try and nurture their hobbies, their strengths, at home as well. You know, this is not their fault. Their brains are wired differently. They will learn to read if they, and I think Jeanette said it before, that, you know, teachers are not trained, unfortunately. I was one of those teachers that was not trained in, I think I had one class in university about, you know, learning disabilities. And I wasn't trained in how to teach reading as well, which is incredible. But I learned this all because of my son. So this is why I'm here and spreading awareness. And I think they have to be celebrated in other areas, because for many of our kids, it's reading and writing is very difficult and it takes a toll. So, you know, if they're great artists, they're very creative, out of the box thinkers. So we just have to try and you know, celebrate all the little things that they do well, because we're at home their biggest cheerleaders. and we need to celebrate any little strengths. Doesn't mean they're going to be an entrepreneur one day, maybe, but hopefully. But you know, we can definitely celebrate all their little milestones. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Melanie. So I understand that you've explained that as a teacher, because I love that you're on both sides of the equation. You're a teacher and a parent of a dyslexic champion. So you can see how it plays on both sides. So parents, if you're listening, please understand that you also have a role to play. Parent-teacher conferences, or PTA meetings, as we call them, are a must for you. So you can discuss with the teacher, let them know what you're seeing at home. And even though some of the teachers or the educators may not be trained, thankfully, we have nonprofits like Dyslexia Nigeria who actually train educators. And on the other hand, it's a nonprofit, like I said, so they need support. So help with the awareness, help with the support. If you're an entrepreneur and you need to do some CSR, you can sponsor some educators here at Dyslexia Nigeria. I mean, it's a great, great cause to go through. So parents, please assist the teachers so they don't get overwhelmed. Thank you so much. So the next question is to Jeanette. So now that we've seen how it plays on the more obvious side, from the tech or from the digital perspective, are there any specific tools or software or strategies that schools, parents, or educators can use to uncover the hidden talents of dyslexic students? Because
Yes,
I
there
think
are multiple.
I think there should be. So yeah, please tell us.
Yes, there are free resources. There are resources that come with a subscription. Schools can certainly use a variety of tools and strategies. When we're talking about free resources, I would venture to say accommodations in the classroom is going to be a lifesaver, game changer. You can have accommodations such as extended time for reading assignments, separate ways in which students with these language-based learning disabilities or these language-based learning differences can showcase their work, and being able to provide them with assistive technology. Now, when we're talking about assistive technology, we're talking about different tools like note-taking apps. We can look at ways in which we can create grammar and spell checkers into the internet tools that they're already using. There are tons of applications online that can be utilized. Speech to text software is going to be super helpful, and even text to speech software is essential as well. Audiobooks and podcasts and so much more. It's a myriad of different resources that can assist with the components of reading, writing, and spelling for those with dyslexia. And like I stated, some are more on the free end, like the applications you can get on your phone and computers, and then some will come with that subscription model. So just being wary of which is best, and a lot of trial and error is going to be effective as well.
That is true. I think trial and error is important, because what the software that works for me might not work for somebody else. So you have to keep trying.
Just jump in there and just add a perspective. I feel like I have a current perspective to everyone's point. But I would say, for the assistive technology, in my experience with my son, it was imperative that the teacher told my son ahead of time, I was going to be giving you these assistive technology when you have your test, because he didn't know. So, the time for the test came around and everyone else got their tests as usual. And then he got headphones so he could have the the text-to-speech software read the questions to him. And he was really, this was in he was in the 4th grade at the time. He got really embarrassed. He freaked out. He was like, why do I have this? Nobody else has it. Am I the only one who doesn't know how to read? And he did horrible. He said, the teacher said he was done in about 20 minutes. She's like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm done. And that was the worst test ever of his entire schooling career up till that point. So we had a meeting afterwards, and my first question to the teacher was, did he know ahead of time? We talked about this, but did you let him know this is what we're going to do? Would you like to sit in the classroom, or would you like to go to a separate space? And she said, oh, no, I didn't tell him. I just thought he will appreciate the fact that I gave him, the computer was going to put the questions to him. So we had a, group conversation, all of us. We let him know. This is not because you don't know how to read. This is just to help you ease the tension of reading so you can focus on putting your knowledge out there. And then the next time he had a test, he said he would rather have the test in they called it the cottage at the time. And it was the room where the kids with the learning differences will go for like extra teaching or whatever. He and a couple other students had their test there, and that ended up being his best test result in the same school year. So there was just a miscommunication that threw him off. So I would say as parents, it's important for you to be involved in these conversations. You made a point about being in the parent-teacher conferences. You want to be there. You want to let the teachers know, don't tell me about he's struggling to read, and I know this stuff already. He's dyslexic. He's going to be dyslexic for the rest of his life. Tell me about the strengths that he has, the things that you're seeing him do in the classroom. I want you to talk more about that. When you call other kids to read in front of the class, tell Jaden when it's time for the number stuff. I'm just throwing his name out there now, call him out and give him a chance also to show that, hey, I'm really good at numbers. I'm good at math. Find ways to give him the chance to shine also in the classroom, because he's not going to be the one standing in front of a class and speaking fluently. So these meetings were important for me to get to the same page with the teacher and let them know that he knows he's dyslexic. We know he's dyslexic. So when we have these parent-teacher meetings, please focus on telling me how you are nurturing his strengths, because it's a two-sided coin. He has those too. So it's a very important.
Yeah.
To echo what you're saying, Livette, I think that is such an amazing point. I would even go further and say that there needs to be student, teacher, and parent meetings so that everybody can get a better understanding of the interests, the strengths, and things that will mainly affect your child as he is matriculating. So what I've seen in the past is students were able to advocate for themselves and say, hey, I work better when. Teachers can take inventory of that information. Parents can validate that. And then it's not this thing where, as you stated, miscommunication, he's embarrassed, he feels isolated, because then that is a trajectory towards self-esteem issues, because now all of his classmates are looking at him like, oh, you getting headphones? Well, why we can't get headphones? So
okay, sorry, Jeanette, please hold on. Please hold on. I'd like you to add this, because this is my next question for you, actually. So while you're on this, could you just talk about how we can encourage empathy or, in non-dyslexic children so that they can assist their classmates? Please just go on with that.
Yeah, I love that. So what I will say to kind of, extend what I was saying about teachers taking inventory, I would love to see more teachers doing quick little lists with their students upon the first week of school to understand more about those students, understand what holidays are important for them to celebrate, understand what are more of the things that they're interested in, what books do they like to read. All of this is a culmination of how that teacher can create empathy in the picture books that they're using, in the activities and the celebrations that they are uplifting the students around. So I think when you know your students better, then you can plan better. And then that way that creates safety, it creates belonging, and overall it creates empathy amongst other students, because now they want to learn more about this particular thing or this particular holiday. For instance, we're celebrating Diwali at my school next week. And a lot of students are like, what is that? So it's an Indian festival. It's a festival of lights. And so this is going to create global thinkers and students who are thinking outside of themselves, because now they know about these different cultures. They know about these different neurodiversities that exist, like ADHD and autism and dyslexia, obviously. So having an inventory on your students and planning appropriately so that you can incorporate that into your lessons so that there is empathy amongst your students.
Okay, thank you. Melanie, would you like to share from your classroom experience as well, how to create empathy, prevent bullying, and things like that?
Well, I think it comes from the classroom, the teacher, the school, the culture, the environment. I think that's one thing that teachers need to understand dyslexia first, because they need to understand that it's not the fault of the child. Again, their brains are wired differently. So understanding that this is not about them not being motivated or lazy or anything to do with intelligence. it's really about them having a difficult time rewiring their brain. They'll be able to learn to read, but it takes sometimes our kids a little bit longer. And obviously the teacher needs to be educated in, how to teach effectively through structured literacy, the science of reading. Just simple things like, being just kind to students and celebrating. I would never, I work with small groups. So anytime they come with me, they're all struggling to learn to read and write. But I always say, we're always trying our best. You're not going to, laugh at anybody if they make mistakes. We all make mistakes. I make mistakes. Just being that model and saying, you're just going to try your best. And, if it's difficult, we're going to just work through it and try our best. And like, for example, I never call on students, especially in a larger classroom, or I encourage teachers not to call on students to read out loud, especially our students with dyslexia. That is like my number one rule. I do have students that do want to try, and I say, fantastic. Sometimes it's a little like, oh, you can do it in your head, because it is a little hard, but that would be, just creating that safe space and understanding that this is not their fault. It's really unexpected. And I think we have to be models. I always think, I think I was always a kind teacher, but I think having a child with dyslexia, I've sat with parents across the table when we're having those conversations, and you feel for them. So this is a wonderful conversation, because we're all connected, whether we're being all advocates for spreading awareness about dyslexia. So I think it comes from the school, the culture, and the classroom teacher.
All right, thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Okay, Lovette, you'd like to, I wanted us to move on because we still have a couple of more questions, but okay, let's have 1 minute to wrap this section up.
No, I was just going to say something to Lovette, where the child was actually presented in an exam position where your son had to, obviously he reacted in the right place. But if it's not the child's way of working, or the child's way of normally using the technology or using that particular product, to then introduce it on a day of exam, I think is really wrong. So that again goes back into the teachers not being trained properly, because for accommodation or assessment, through assessment, that should have been made, the teacher should have been made aware, the child should have been made aware, or everybody should be aware, and the child should be using this in class and in the way of learning normally before you actually introduce this on exam day. So I think the way you handled it was really good. And I really think, again, goes back into training of teachers, and understanding what our needs are, what the dyslexic person's needs are before exam times and things like that. Yeah, I just wanted to add that into it.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. So I would say this once again, training is important. Dyslexia Nigeria trains educators. Please help create awareness. Let people know they have a plethora of training materials for teachers, parents, educators, and everyone who's just interested in learning. Because I myself am not a teacher, but this is something that I'm interested in. So I probably will just take a training, because you never know. You never know who you would end up, supporting. Okay, so the next section we're going to go into is, managing the strengths and shining the lights, basically. So that's what we're going to be talking about next. So my next question is for Joy. Okay, Dr. Joy. So 1 second. Okay, what are some common misconceptions that could reduce the abilities? So let me put it this way. In the classroom, for example, there's students who might be great at other things and not so great at reading or writing. So what are the misconceptions surrounding these children that could hinder them from shining in the other fields? So how can we stop those misconceptions so that they can shine in the areas that they're supposed to shine in?
Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to use myself as an example because that's me. You're talking about me
great.
here. As a child, I wasn't good at reading. I wasn't good at spelling. I remember the word have. Oh my gosh, page after page, I've been told have, and I couldn't still get it. But when it came to maths, I could add up faster than a computer. By the time you finish saying the numbers, I gave you the answer. But that wasn't recognized. All was being focused was on this little bit of me that couldn't do this, instead of harnessing the other side, which was very good. And who knows what I would have been like, what I could have given to the world now. So coming back to children, that is the same thing. I mean, because there's nine things that you can do and you could do really well. And that one thing that you can't do, and everybody's just focusing on that. And that is the bit that also is taking away your confidence and everything. So the 9 things that you can do is missing and it's hanging in there, and nobody is allowing you to enhance on that. I got a young, I used to say one of my students at the moment, he can't identify, he can say the alphabets, but he just cannot. If you pinpoint each one, if you say A, he looks at you and goes, but you just said it, you just said A. He'll say A, and then you come to say B or C or anyway. But we introduced clay to mold the alphabets and other things, because this is what we use in the Davis program. And this young guy started to mold shoes. And I'm not kidding. If you see the shoes this guy designs with clay, you are ready to wear them. They are so beautiful. But haven't not given him the clay, we would have known the side of him, and would have been always concentrating on now the alphabet. So now we use the shoes now to introduce, because he's not interested in doing anything else but creating these shoes. So now we're going to now use the shoes to do what? To say, okay, can you create 2 sneakers and 1, well, he likes to call pastor shoes. So he has the pastor shoes, and he has the sneakers, and he has the runner's shoes, and he has all this. So can you create, say, 10 pastor shoes and 2 sneakers, and take away the 2 from the 10? And that's how we get him to do maths. So by enhancing what he's interested in, and enhancing and using and also encouraging in him and supporting him what he's good at, he's now able to do what he's not good at. And then when you say, okay, now can we put shoes, and then can you take S out of the letters and show me where the S is? All of a sudden, S is being identified. So so we need to continue to encourage and also nurture what we can do, and play down. I'm not saying we shouldn't work on what we can't do, but play down what we can do. I mean, when it comes to spelling and reading now, we've got all the technology there to spell. I mean, I couldn't have finished my master's if I didn't have Dragon.
Okay.
To do my exams. Now I could spell the big words, so I could use all the big words that I wanted to use that I couldn't spell to finish my exams. But if I didn't have the spell checker or the support that I needed, I couldn't have done it. So at the same time, why were we concentrating so much on what I couldn't do, which is the spelling, when all that I needed was it's like having glasses. You need glasses to read. I can't read. I see the letters. I can't see. But if you give me glasses and you correct my eyesight, I can read.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So you give me Dragon, I could now speak into Dragon, and I could use all the words I want to use, and then it can read back to me, and I could correct it. So why can't we do that for the students and say, okay, you can't read. Yes, we are teaching you how to read. Yes, I got masters in psychology, but can I spell psychology? No. How do I spell psychology? Please stop yawning. Ecology. Now I can spell psychology. Thank you.
What Oh, wow.
So
Wow. That
so
is
so so
brilliant.
saying to
Wow.
me to spell psychology, and I'm going but then if I learn how to spell my own way, how to help me spell psychology, yes, I could spell psychology.
Please stop your. Wow.
So these are
Okay.
the things that we need to obviously try and see that, look, being dyslexic doesn't mean you're lazy, you know, which all the names that I've been called or you've been called in the past. But look at me now. I am flowing. I am a dyslexic thinker. I think outside the box. I've done all sorts of jobs that I'm sure most people wouldn't have done. And I'll not change being dyslexic for anything in the world because it's created me, it's made me. And I'm very proud to be a dyslexic thinker. So, but thank you. By the same token, we need to harness this in the children, in our classes, and then also through teachers, not to get the children being put into boxes and say, well, you can't spell, so you can't have a break, you can't do this, you can't go out, you can't, you know, do anything because you can't spell. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to touch quickly on the parents also are the biggest worries, I think. We're not the children, because most parents, as we are in Africa, think it's a spiritual thing, and the children, some children are even taken out of school to go to for prayers, to go for spiritual cleansing, to, you know, so that they can be helped with their reading and stuff. I actually went through some of it. I think I was given raw eggs in the mornings to drink because they reckon it will increase my thinking or my whatever, to improve my reading. I'm going all night prayers so that you will be, and I need the sleep. I need my sleep so that my brains will work better in the morning. And here I am praying all night. At a young age. What is that? And half of the time you're falling asleep because they believe that spiritually something is amiss somewhere. So you need, yes, I mean, I'm a Christian. I do believe in my prayers, and I do believe that I was helped by praying. But at the same time, that wasn't the issue. There was actually a real situation that needs addressing. So we need to see the positive side of children. We need to see what the child can do. We need to see what that person enhances. I mean, as I keep going through, my maths was my forte, but it was never recognized because of the lack of spelling. And because of lack of spelling, I remember my parents, well, my mom on a dying bed said to me, oh, you should have been a doctor. You were so good at maths. Well, it's too late now. You know what I mean? But had that been recognized at, say, age 9, 10, who knows? And supported and encouraged, the confidence, and instead of being retarded, well, not retarded, but shy and withdrawn into yourself and not being able to express yourself with others because you are being told, well, what you're doing is not spelling. Can you go back into spelling or reading or something? You know, whilst your child is being continuously being put down and told you can't do, let's start. And I'm so grateful for this conversation. I'm so grateful for the new look and the new way of now how dyslexia is being looked at, that hopefully from here in future we'll be encouraging more children and more to, you know, look at things differently.
We're definitely moving forward. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. We're more or less out of time, actually. But before we answer the audience questions, we have about 3 questions waiting for us. Oh, 4 questions now. Okay. So quick story. When I was in high school, I had the worst time with writing. I couldn't take notes properly in class. My notes were a mess till date. If I show you my notes here, you probably can't even make sense of it because you're like, what is she writing? However, as a debater, I was unrivaled. You cannot defeat me in a debate, right? So that was my thing. So I may not be able to write in class. I was the slowest, the worst handwriting, most disorganized notes because I would always cancel. But as a debater and as a speaker now, I mean, I've made the most of that. So my question is to everyone. I'll start with Melanie because, you know, you've worked with children for a long time. I'll start with you, then anyone else can pitch. And we have about 2 minutes to address this. What are the top skills, or what are the most likely skills for dyslexic children to excel at? What are the things they're most good at, basically?
Well, I think as we were saying before, there's no two dyslexics alike. So I think, you know, many times there's a book called The Dyslexic Advantage that I read as, I don't know if you can see it. There's, I think, an updated version. And that was one of the first books that I read after my son was diagnosed. And so again, just putting that, maybe that Rubik's Cube in their hand, or we were saying before, you know, the clay in their hands. We don't know what they're good at. We don't know what their talents or hobbies may be. And I think as parents, it's a little bit easier maybe to see what they're good at outside of school. And in the classroom too, we can try and harness that as well. But you know, out of the box thinkers, creative, you know, you said you're a fantastic debater. You know, there's just, I think we just have to harness just put those, you know, different things in their hands or different activities and see what they excel at.
Okay, thank you. So anyone else, are there any specific skill sets that dyslexic children, Jeanette, Lovette, Dr. Joy, anyone?
From the book that
they
Melanie
try
just
good.
sorry.
Okay, who's going first? Okay, Lovette, you go on.
From the book that Melanie just showed, that book was a life changer for me as well. And it really did help me identify my son's strengths. So it focuses on the mind strengths, you know, material reasoning, interconnected reasoning, narrative reasoning, and dynamic reasoning. And these are four different groups of skills that most dyslexic show. So a dyslexic might show one or two. For example, material reasoning is the ability to manipulate 3D objects in your mind without physically even touching them. So for example, a real life scenario that I always tell about my son, who we're trying to relocate furniture out of a room, we're volunteering somewhere. We're trying to relocate this big furniture, big couch, out of the room into another space. And there were about 8 adults, and none of us could figure it out. We were going, twisting it all kinds of ways. Someone even started saying, oh, maybe they might have to knock the wall down, and then when we move this couch, we'll put the wall back. It seemed impossible. And my little 8-year-old, it was 8 or 9 at the time, he said, oh no, if you do it like this and do it like this and turn it like this, it will go out the door. And everyone kind of looked like, huh? But me knowing that he's really good at material reasoning, I said, oh yeah, let's do it. We did exactly what Jaden said, and the couch just went right out the door. And I have several examples of him thinking like that. You know, interconnected reasoning, seeing the big picture out of something, taking one example, tying it to something else, and creating these big picture thinkers is also part of the interconnected reasoning. So an example would be, you know, there's a problem at hand, and some non-dyslexics are focusing on the step-by-step, how do we figure out this issue step-by-step? A dyslexic thinker, on the other hand, might just blurt out the idea out of sheer insight. They may not be able to explain what the step-by-step procedure is, but they can tell you, if you do this, this is going to work, because they have, you know, they have the ability to excel at insightful or thinking. So those are the kinds of things that if you see those things in your child, you want to nurture it. You want to remind them, oh, you see what you just did? It's your dyslexic mind that is making you think that way. That's brilliant. You know, I couldn't have thought about that. Someone else couldn't have thought about that. And the more you identify unique skills that your kids have and praise them in that focus, it boosts their self-confidence and makes it easy for them to go to school and be confident in who they are, own their dyslexia, and say, because I'm dyslexic, I'm able to do X, Y, Z, you know, I'm strong in these areas. But if you don't spend the time nurturing, first of all, identifying their strengths, nurturing it, and reminding them that because you're dyslexic is why you have this brilliant characteristic, that helps them build a persona that when they go to the public space, They own their dyslexia. They confidently tell people they're dyslexic because they don't see it from the negative side. So as a parent, the school may not do this for your child, but it's your responsibility to make sure you find what your child is good at and constantly remind them it's because you're dyslexic that you're really good at X, Y, Z.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay. I'm sorry, Kito. I just wanted to butt in and say that we have less than 5 minutes to wrap up the panel.
Yeah, I'm aware. So thank you so much. I think we'll use the last 3 minutes to just take the questions we have in the chat box. Okay, so I'll start with this one, and I'd appreciate if we can answer this question, in real time. So, hello, Melanie. Does the Canadian curriculum accommodate children with dyslexia?
Well, it's interesting, in Canada, we don't even use the word dyslexia. We want to, there's a lot of hashtags say dyslexia because we often use like impairment in reading and writing. We do have evaluation. So in evaluation, they'll say an impairment in reading and writing, but they'll sometimes put in brackets dyslexia. For students who have the actual diagnosis, they're students at risk. They do get hopefully intervention by somebody who is knowledgeable in structured literacy and the science of reading. But as we were saying throughout this panel, teachers are not trained in how to help students with dyslexia, and it seems to be from throughout the world. I've met some incredible people from all different parts of the world, and many teachers are not being trained effectively. So I'm hoping that that conversation will continue to happen. But I always say that my son was only diagnosed at the end of grade 2, beginning of grade 3, and that's too late. And many, people do not even get a diagnosis. So I think the most important thing is that they get effective intervention, hopefully the core classroom instruction. Don't wait for a diagnosis. If any teacher is saying, let's wait and see, that's like a huge red flag. So that would be my number one piece of advice today.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you, Melanie. We're basically out of time, so I'm just really trying to breeze through the questions. So I'm sorry, we have to keep everything as compact as possible for this last phase. I'm really sorry that I'm rushing you through the questions. Okay, the next question is, how can you differentiate between a child who needs to practice more from a child who is genuinely dyslexic, as a parent teacher who doesn't know anything about this challenge? So who's going to take that? The difference between a child who just needs to put in more effort and a child who is actually dyslexic. Jeanette, could you please answer that? Would you recommend a checklist, or what would you say?
I would recommend a screener, but I also think that that's a subjective question, because how do we know that child's effort, and that they're not putting in all of their effort? So that's one of those questions that could go either way. So I would say if that child, usually if they've had formal instruction in reading and writing for 2 years and they're still not quite grasping it, then at that point, maybe you can start looking at providing interventions. And through those interventions, we talked about structured literacy and the science of reading, through those interventions that are embedded in their coursework, if they're still not able to grasp that, then you would need to look at doing a screener or an assessment. But we can't just rule out, say they're lazy or they need more practice or this or that. We have to go through some different channels. And again, that's going to be with them having had instruction for about 2 years, and then using some intervention methods.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to appreciate every one of you for this amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Joy, Melanie, Jeanette, and Lovette. I think we have covered most of the bases, right? And hopefully this is a conversation that has been recorded and will be made available. So even those who are not here live can still benefit from it, because it's something that everyone needs to know. Thank you so much for this. And I've learned a lot as well. I think I can confidently say that with the knowledge I've gotten from here, I can just build on it, and I can even help people in my own little capacity as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you to the panelists. If you still have questions, I think we have the amazing team from Dyslexia Nigeria answering some of the questions. So you can keep the questions coming in the Q&A section, and they will just respond to it, by typing instead of answering verbally. So if you're still here, please do not leave. It's not over. Don't log out. If possible, keep sharing. The conversation goes on. The next panel is even probably more interesting than this one. So thank you so much. Back to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you so much, Kit Bankole, for that fantastic, super fantastic panel session. And of course, to all the ladies who contributed on that panel session, thank you so much. There actually were questions coming in, which was quite impressive. And a lot of people have been asking about, how to get training, how to know that children are dyslexic or not, how to identify. So there's something amazing that Dyslexia Nigeria is doing. And I'll just read it out. There's a website to visit. It's courses.dyslexianigeria.com. Very easy to access and to go through. And if and when you go onto that website, you see things like practical dyslexia, know-how for everyone. You keep scrolling down. There's so much to learn from there. You can get unlimited access to courses, case studies, digital resources, expert guidance, and more. You could also build your skill and knowledge with online trainings created by certain experts. You could gain rounded skills and easily transition to real-life scenarios in classrooms and outside the classrooms at home. You could learn with Dyslexia Nigeria, learn from the best hands, if I do say so myself. You could also get certified, as a matter of fact, and then you could also build for everyone and anyone around you. And finally, at the bottom of that website, there actually are real-life testimonials from people who have, who have come to Dyslexia Nigeria, who have learned from Dyslexia Nigeria, and who have also used their skill sets and knowledge to teach and to help other children and adults who actually have been dyslexic and needed help. So once again, thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Dyslexia Nigeria. Again, like you mentioned, Kito, the questions will be answered eventually. We could go to the Q&A session. There are questions going on there. You could also look at some of the questions and learn from them. One fantastic thing I know is that as this panel was going on and the different panelists were giving examples of their own experiences or experiences of children or people around them, I was able to relate with almost every single one of them. And just before the next panel comes up, I'll quickly say that as a broadcast journalist, how I deal with some of my own challenges. First of all, one big challenge I have is reading the profile of all the panelists. I had to go through twice on my way down here so that I don't stumble across the words. But I've been able to understand that if there are muddled up words or paragraphs, you can break them into paragraphs, and then it's easier for a dyslexic person to read. I can hardly read from the teleprompter, which makes it difficult for me to cast the news, but freestyling, I am fantastic. And then I have a lot of ideas in my head, which I know that happens with so many dyslexics, very, very creative. That's partly how I handle my own situations. And I know that many people in my position too can learn from that and actually do the same. Now we move on to our second panel. And to handle this particular panel session, we have somebody who I also met in the course of doing interviews and reports concerning dyslexia. As a matter of fact, this was just about last month. The month of October is the month for dyslexia, and we had a fantastic conversation. I'm talking about none other than Dr. Olaide Odediran. Now, Dr. Olaide is a social impact and education specialist, passionate about enabling individual freedom, opportunities, and well-being. She serves as a director at Dyslexia Nigeria, where she educates, empowers, and convenes stakeholders to create an environment where dyslexics can thrive. Specifically, as a certified workplace needs assessor, she focuses on dyslexia in adults and in the workplace, supporting organizations to develop dyslexia-friendly workplaces and enable individuals to identify and adopt coping strategies for optimal performance. As a UK CIM certified executive function coach and certified cognitive coach, Olaide works with children and adults to develop and fine-tune core executive function skills critical for academic performance, work productivity, and work-life balance. These skills include response inhibition, metacognition, working memory, goal-directed persistence, organization, planning, and time management, amongst others. She also works as a career coach, supporting individuals to identify meaningful, fulfilling work that embodies their authenticity and harnesses their true potential, and to take positive steps to realize their goals. And finally, Olaide holds a master's degree in international education policy from the Harvard Graduate School of Education and the first-class honors degree in business administration and law from Keele University, UK. I hope I got that pronunciation. She's certified cognitive coach, International Board of Credentialing and Continuing Education Standards. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like us to give a warm welcome to Dr. Olaide Odediran, who will be our second panel moderator. Thank you, Dr. Olaide.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bernard. I feel very much like the first moderator, Kitan. This feels like a huge spotlight on me. I'm not a doctor, unfortunately. I wish. Of everything you've said, I could claim to be a doctor. I think Dr. Chris Arnold, we're going to meet you shortly. You can tell us all about the journey to being that, but thank you for this warm welcome. And thank you.
Just before you go on, apologies, Dr. Olaide, I would like to tell the panelists to kindly put on their cameras so that we can put them on the spotlight here whilst we prepare for the panel. So please, panelists, put on your cameras. We would unmute you from here when it's time, but please, we'll need that so that we can put you on the spotlight. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption. Please go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Brenner. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today. Thank you to my panelists that are coming up and all the panelists that have spoken before. It's lovely to be here at the third Africa Dyslexia Dialogue and to have these conversations that really contribute to what we all think about dyslexia. Our panel today is discussing creative problem solving and innovation. And we're exploring how dyslexic thinking patterns contribute to innovative ideas and solutions. And I have an amazing panel with me today, Mr. Tunji Andrews, wanting to see his video come on shortly, but he's a highly skilled economist, entrepreneur, is committed to financial inclusion, is an advocate on financial offerings for Africa's underserved informal sector. As an economist, he has over 10 years of experience in public and private sector roles across West Africa. He's a renowned media personality. He's anchored shows on the big screen and on radio. And in 2021, he put his words into action by creating Awaba, a one-stop microfinancial services hub for Africa's informal workforce. Welcome, Mr. Tunji Andrews. The one thing I haven't said here is that you're also a proud dyslexic. So I'm really glad that you're here to talk about how dyslexia has shaped your success and everything you've done. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Wole Oyeniran is the Enterprise Technology and Performance Leader and TMT Industry Leader for Deloitte in West Africa. He is responsible for enterprise solutions with a focus on systems implementation enabled by cloud engineering. He has over 23 years consulting experience and assists clients to understand and use technology solutions to solve business problems and transform ways of working. You look like I'm saying something that's not your profile, but it's everything about you. He is a certified Scrum Master. He's a seasoned Agile coach. He's a founding member of the Governing Council of the FinTech Association of Nigeria. We are honored to have you here with us, Mr. Wole Oyeniran. Thank you so much for joining us. Donna Stevenson, the female on our panel. We came from a panel with all women. Happy to be the one bringing in the men on the conversation. But hello, Donna Stevenson. It's great to have you here with us. Donna started her career as a nursery nurse and a primary school teacher. She developed a passion for supporting learners with dyslexia that led to many years at the British Dyslexia Association. And through those years, she worked with children and adults with dyslexia, working within education and workplaces to raise awareness and champion the dyslexia-friendly approach. Her passion and her career is now with supporting adults in the workplace through delivering training and as a workplace needs assessor. She is with Succeed with Dyslexia as the head of training assessment, utilizing her years of experience to create a global service. Such an outstanding profile. Welcome, Donna Stevenson. And finally, last but also very much not the least, Dr. Chris Arnold, who holds the doctor title I'm trying to be given this morning. Thank you for joining us. He is a doctor of business, former board director of Saatchi & Saatchi in London, former board member of the Direct Marketing Association, former chair of both the DMA Agencies Council and the Creative Council. He's a founder of Creative Orchestra, an ethical brand marketing advertising agency. And his business consulting arm, the Garage Innovation Lab, was the first business to advertise for dyslexics to join its workforce. He's a co-founder of My Social Impact, specialist in social purpose. He has co-founded Diversity Lab, a global collective of high-achieving neurodiverse thinkers, mostly dyslexic thinkers, with their motto, using our ability to think different to make a difference in the world. I wish I could go through your profile, Dr. Arnold, but it's a whole page long of all your achievements. And most astounding of all, you have achieved this with dyslexia. So I'm really glad that you're here to talk with us as well. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Just to give some context to our conversation, I think, often everyone who thinks about dyslexia thinks about the difficulties with dyslexia and the gaps with dyslexia and all that we have to do to remediate dyslexia. Oh, there's difficulties with reading, and there's challenges with writing and spelling and not remembering and all of these things. But the truth is that there's so many strengths that come with dyslexia. And that's really what the focus is, especially when we think about innovation and creative problem solving, which is what we really believe we need for the future of our workforce and for our communities. So we want to talk about that and talk about how do we identify those strengths? What are those dyslexic strengths? Are they real, tangible strengths? Are they strengths that anyone can have? How do we enable them? How do we foster them? That's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to start with Dr. Chris Arnold, because there's something you said that I found so interesting. You said, some of us are wired differently, see things differently, think differently. These are the people who change the world. The minds that see the other way and the way forward. So what is this dyslexic thinking?
Well, I have to say, I totally believe that as well. We're actually doing a social impact of examination of the world, thanks to dyslexia, which is very interesting. So we're bringing the two together and saying, why would the world be without all those great thinkers, innovators, and people that have invented things from the telephone to the iPhone? And have created a big change. And those are the people that take us forward all the time. I always think if there was no dyslexics, we'd probably still be in caves, living a prehistoric lifestyle. I think that in a world where it encourages that kind of thinking, then we can benefit from that. But in a world that suppresses that kind of thinking, we just hold ourselves back. And I think always our challenge is working in the creative industries and around innovation and inventiveness and just general creativity is that we're often got this kind of, we're having to fight the brakes on what we're trying to do rather than being encouraged and supported. And I think that's one of our big challenges is if we flip the world around, then it would be a lot better if the dyslexics around the world, we'd be all much happier. And I think there's a big challenge there, but we are restricted by those who I always use the term rather than dyslexic thinking, I use dimensional thinking because it's kind of got a broader range, but it does describe how we think, that we don't think in that two-dimensional way. It's like 3D chess. We think in a totally spatial way. And when I'm connecting ideas, it's sort of one there, one here, pull it down like some scene out of Matrix. And for those who don't have that 3D, it's a bit like someone who sees in black and white, can't see in color. We who can see in color can understand that you can't see in color, but if you can't see in color, you can't understand how we see. And I think that's one of our really big challenges in trying to educate and inform people, and which is what I think is great about today's conference.
Thank you so much. Wow, you said a lot of things there. Seen in color and seen in black and white, and with the matrix. I'm struggling to understand myself, honestly. Saying what you're saying, but are you saying that these skills cannot be learned because you're describing them as something that you're born with, you have? But for everyone else who thinks maybe in black and white, do you think those dyslexic strengths and those skills can be learned, like design thinking?
Yes, to a degree, but no as well. I think the unique ability that we have is to do with our wiring. However, I think a lot of people go through, if you look at any of the Ken Robinson talks, he talks about how education systems globally compress us down to become very neurolinear in our thinking. Everything is like, you know, black and white, in and out, up and down, you know, even down to boys and girls. We tend to work in a more polar culture, which has come from the Greeks, actually, rather than this idea of, you know, the many shades in between. I think we can teach them to a degree. We actually at Diversity Lab launched a course earlier this year called Think Like a Dyslexic. Now, a lot of people said, oh, that's a controversial title, but we chose that deliberately. What we found was that when we went to companies and said to CEOs who see dyslexia as a talent, you could make your workforce think better. We can turbocharge. We can lift them up a level. We can help them to start to see more dimensionally. They were really interested. But you get to HR is not a dimensional thinking department. Largely, it tends to be very two-dimensional, and it actually saw it as scary. One HR person said, "Why would we want to do that? We don't want a staff of chaotic people." You know, and these prejudices all came out, you know, these negative prejudices. But we believe that we can take people another level up. I don't believe you're going to turn someone into a Steve Jobs or Richard Branson, or, I mean, to be honest, creativity has been my life, but actually it's thanks to dyslexia that I actually been successful, not because of it. It hasn't been a problem for me, but because I work in the creative industries, it's an industry that embraces creativity, whereas finance, it's the very opposite. So I think you can, to a degree, teach people. And I think if we can teach people to take their thinking up a level, then actually they get to better understand how we think and appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Donna, I'm going to ask you to build on that for me, because I know, you know, succeeding with dyslexia in the workplace, there's something Dr. Arnold just said now about, you know, some industries are more 2D than 3D, but dyslexics find themselves in all industries. So, you know, what do you say about dyslexia in 2D, specifically industries? How do we identify those strengths in an environment that doesn't necessarily open itself to embracing them?
Thank you so much. It's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because I think, as Chris is saying, we seem to have a 3D and 2D kind of roles currently in our society. I suspect, though, that all roles should be 3D. So, you know, Chris is talking about HR maybe classically not being so creative, but I think actually the best HR departments are creative in terms of how they get the best out of their workforce. And maybe we're in a transitional phase at the moment where roles that we would classically have associated with a 2D way of thinking, finance or HR, whatever it may be, I think maybe it's a reframe for those professions to realise the benefit of becoming 3D. Whilst we are in a climate there, and I think, you know, it's wonderful to talk about gifts and talents and reframing dyslexia, isn't it? But I suspect all of us still engage with individuals who are really, really struggling around their differences, because I don't think society is caught up, certainly at grassroots level. I know the high echelons of certain organisations may have these very intellectual discussions around benefits and so on. I can't wait till that filters down for those people who work in a factory or those people who work in a fast food franchise or wherever it might be. You know, it's important that we understand that we're not quite there yet. And I think that there's also a socioeconomic aspect to some of these discussions, that we do have, you know, Apple maybe, who are very committed to these types of issues, but maybe, you know, other companies are not. And maybe, you know, some of that is about raising awareness. So for those people who are in organisations and in roles where they feel very discriminated against and very misunderstood, I guess it's about understanding, you know, very practically what your rights are as a worker, and trying to be proud of yourself and understand that the gifts and talents that you bring, you know, with you. And, you know, it's about organisations like the work we do, working with the unemployed and so on, to figure out how they can start to you know, feel good about themselves and put together their profile that will appeal to organisations. So I think that, you know, it was still quite a long way off, I think, the journey that we need to be. We've just been listening to our colleagues talking about education, and our education system isn't a good fit yet. So we've even got still young people coming through into the world of work who already feel misunderstood and disenfranchised. So I think, it's a case of trying to raise awareness, and conversations like this are a part of that.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I mean, there's a lot that you've said there as well, the education system and creating the awareness. And in some ways, it's a lot of pressure also for individuals with dyslexia that have a lot to give, if they feel that they also have to create the environment where they can thrive. So, Mr. Tunji Andrews, I'm going to go to you next, because you have dyslexia as well. You've managed to build a thriving organization in what we've labeled in this conversation as a traditionally 2D industry in finance and in insurance. So, for you, what are those strengths that you think show up for you the most in the workplace? Is there really a dyslexic edge and some strengths that you believe are due to your dyslexia that have allowed you to thrive?
Thank you for having me, and great to see everyone on the panel, and everyone else that's been participating all day. So my team generally feels I'm a genius of sorts. I mean, especially when I call myself the ideas guy. So we've been able to, as a small company, the smallest player in a multi-billion-dollar industry, being the company driving the largest level of innovation within the industry. And it's not like I tend to have read most of the things that I come up with. It's just like it makes sense to me, and I don't understand why it doesn't make sense to everybody else. So it's like there's a challenge within the pension industry where it's around reconciliation, and basically payments being made and not not properly reconciled. And my thinking was, why don't we validate payments before we make them? And everybody was like, okay, but we don't do that. And I'm like, well, we can, right? So we start to go around in circles and in circles, and we finally found it, and it's working today. And it's reduced the reconciliation issues by over 90%. And when my team tends to look at me and hear me have another session, because I'm always having those sessions where I have this big idea, and I think they've gotten used to the fact that he's going to come up with something really out of the world, out of the pack with our industry. But to be honest, and I like the way the doctor said, it's like seen in color. I just can see it. I don't understand why I see it. I just know I see it. I just don't get how I see it, but I do know I see it. So if you were to ask me how I do it, I don't know, but I just know that it's something that exists, and I've come to embrace it.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, embracing it, I think, maybe something easier when you're in charge of the organization and you can set the tone. And I guess there's another question we'll get to about when you're not, and when you're an employee, how do you let those strengths shine? But for now, I'm going to go to Mr. Wale Yeniro. I'm really excited to talk with you because, you work with so many organizations on technology and innovation. And I think when we talk about the dyslexic strengths, we talk about how they apply to innovation. And there's a video that came out Made by Dyslexia. We were talking about it earlier in the day, that says, AI can aggregate, but dyslexia innovates. So at the end of the day, can technology really innovate? So my question for you is, when organizations are seeking innovation, what are they really looking for? And do you think that they truly find that with technology?
Okay, thank you for having me on this. And when innovation is sought, it's like a double-edged sword. Because from my experience, we as humans, typical standardly abled humans, tend to get in our own way all the time. We are extremely comfortable with the familiar and constantly reject the different, which is completely an antithesis to innovation. Because innovation requires us to embrace the uncomfortable and run with the different. So what that means is that to be truly innovative, organizations need, in quotes, visionaries, people who think differently from everybody else, because the same thinking produces the same results, which is not innovative. So it's always a challenge to facilitate a process where you trigger people to get out of their, comfort zone and start looking at things. It's really a struggle most times. And that's half of the work, to just get people to shift their mind. And it tends to be very, very uncomfortable. But that is what they actually need to be truly innovative. More often than not, what you see organizations do is recycle their old classic hits, repaint it and say, hey, this is innovation. No, it's not innovation. I'm happy that you mentioned artificial intelligence just now. Again, AI is going down a similar path in the sense that it has a lot of potential, but like anything in technology, it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you feed it the same patterns that you've always known and had, all that the AI would do is end up reconfirming your existing bias, validating your existing assumptions, and saying, oh, this is AI, so it must be right. No, it doesn't have to be. It just depends on the quality of information provided, and that tends to come from a limited thinking perspective. That has to change for true innovation to happen, as I'm sure as we speak more and talk about other people who have been truly innovative in this space, we'll see how that connects to this superpower called dyslexia, because that's how I want to describe it. It's truly an inherent, inbuilt ability to think differently, which is exactly what innovation requires.
Wow, thank you very much for that. Dr. Arnold has been nodding and nodding. I see he's really excited about what you said, but so because he was saying earlier, and I mean you might want to say that again, Dr. Arnold, about this thing about what goes in, garbage out. But who's putting the garbage in? Is it us or is it aliens? But that's something we'll come to. But really, that part that you're saying about is the thinking that needs to be different. That is the actual innovation. I guess in your work, where is the room for that innovative thinking? I'm sure when organizations engage you as Deloitte, they haven't been able to find the solution in-house. So how do you help them, or where do you see the room to help them introduce new thinking, even from within their organizations, to supplement whatever technology might be doing so that they can attain that innovation?
8 times out of 10, the solutions to their challenges are within the organization. They just don't have the open-mindedness to listen and to engage and embrace what is uncomfortable. It's as simple as that. There's a common joke about consultants like myself that, you hire a consultant to look at your watch and tell you the time. Now, it sounds, like an insult to consultants, but if you think about it, why couldn't you tell yourself the time? Because at the end of the day, when you look at your own watch, you see what you don't want to, and you create something different that is based on what you used to. So what consultants like us do is you introduce what is called objectivity and neutrality. We're not part of your business, so we have no challenge telling you the truth. And what tends to happen is that the voices within your business that you hadn't been listening to because they are too junior, they don't have the right training, they're very radical, we listen to them because they understand your business. We understand the places your business wants to go to, and we distill what they've said to tell you point blank, you have the answer, and here it is. And more often than not, that's the best fit solution for them, because the same solution doesn't work for different organizations at the same time with the same problem, because each person's or each company's or each business's context is different. And those who are within the business understand its context. So when they are saying go left, when everyone else is saying go right, and we also look at it and say, okay, go left, it makes sense if you remove bias, political constructs, if you remove inherent human biases and pride and whatever the case may be, the left makes sense. Even though right is almost like good money after bad, because I've spent so much in this, I can't leave it now. But left is a new direction that's going to be much, much better. We can tell you, listen, we've spoken to your guys. We looked at the market, left makes sense. So the reason why they hire us is because we bring that objectivity. How do we not get them to listen? We engage at the very top, at the board level. The people who have a long-term stake in the business. Executives come and go, but the board remains. We engage at the board level to say, listen, do you want this business to be successful or not? Yes or no? If you do, then you have to listen to some hard truths. Now, let me now give you the final clincher. The number one way, especially in this market, that you can convince anyone of an action is to use what is called benchmarking. You find who they will compare themselves to internationally or locally, who have done something similar to what we are recommending, the outcomes they have achieved, and we'll tell them, we know you admire these guys. They did this similar thing, not exactly the same, but similar thing, and they got this result. That always works. And it's a thing that can also be instructive in how we deal with the challenge of adopting formally the power of dyslexia. If we're able to show, locally a fantastic case study as to great products, ideas, and solutions created with that mindset, everyone's going to want a dyslexic in their organization, heading their strategy, or heading their innovation, or heading their user experience design, or heading their customer service. All those areas that require empathy, that require thinking differently, that require being able to navigate abstracts. All of those things, once you're able to have that kind of a case study, and that's what tends to work, especially in this market.
Fantastic, thank you. So what I found interesting there was most of what you talked about were what I call them the softer barriers that the organization needs to remove. It's about that openness, the willingness to listen, the willingness to go in a different direction, and that a lot of things are engineered to create a structure that forces those to happen. But Dr. Arnold, you've been nodding and smiling. I really want to hear what you're thinking.
Well, I think AI is a very interesting one because it is changing the way everyone's thinking. But unfortunately, a lot of people aren't that well informed about it, and there's a lot of myths going around. We referred earlier to that one about AI and dyslexia, and it's interesting. There's an artist called Eleanor Crook who was working with Midjourney, which is a very visual aspect, and there's an artist who are working together to see how AI complemented what she did. And the final conclusion was, it's a great tool. It's quite interesting. It shows you some alternatives. He said, but there's no I in AI. It doesn't have that human element that takes things higher. And it's the same as people say in music, there's no ear in AI. It just gives you the same. I think you're dead right, actually, you say about it takes everything that's out there and it just then recomposes it. And you just get a bit more of the same. You're not actually getting leaps. So AI may take a step forward, but it doesn't take leaps and bounds. And I think what is very characteristic of dyslexics, especially those like me who also are ADHD, which is why I speak so fast, is that we take enormous leaps. We have that we don't have a fear factor. We have a belief in the confidence of our ideas that we will jump over the cavern, believing we will land on the other side. Whereas AI doesn't have that ability. It doesn't have a human idea to take leaps. It doesn't have a human idea to actually do risks and push forward. So I think that's one thing that's still unique for us, is that we do have that kind of belief, and we can see opportunities, we can see outcomes that there's no way AI will ever see. So I was saying earlier on that, I think very neuralinear people are hoping that we're going to be replaced by AI, but we're hoping that neuralinear people are going to be replaced by AI. We'll see who wins at the end.
Thank you for that. Who's going to win in the end? No one really knows. We're just hoping, like I said, like you said, that we can find a way for technology to enhance and enable the things that we need to take us forward. If that is, dyslexic thinking or dyslexic thinking skills or empathy, how do we get technology to enhance those? What do we actually put in it to help us move forward? Mr. Andrews, I want to ask you about, again, putting those into an organization. So sometimes people think that when these strengths are there, that the other strengths required for implementation might suffer, because that's sometimes where dyslexic challenges show up. So for you, in taking those ideas, you're the ideas guy, and that's one of your strengths. How do you then get the implementation to happen with whatever challenges come with your dyslexia?
I think it's the power of synergy. One of the things that I think works the best for me is in understanding my strengths and my weaknesses. I understood very early that I might have great ideas, but I also understood very quickly that I wasn't able to think in structure in terms of this is line item one, line item two. I might know how to basically what the whole overall idea is, but how to make it go from one to two to three was always a challenge. So I always made sure I supplemented or um, uh, supported myself with people who thought that way. Also, I think I'm not entirely sure if this is dyslexic in nature, but I think I tend to have strong empathy and always tend to want to understand why someone is not as efficient in their area, and it doesn't tend to help my leadership style. So I always tend to have a strong iron fist as my number two wherever I've ever worked. You know, the first thing I get is the strong number two, who is the bulldozer, the person who breaks everything. I'm the always, oh, okay, let's work through it. Okay, we'll find a way to make it happen. So I've always found that it's very important that once you have a dyslexic person in an organization, you want to build structure around the person to be able to help the person's strengths become very useful to the organization. And I wanted to speak to earlier on when you were talking about if the person is not in the leadership and the person works for the organization. What I also found that was very useful was to because I always had people who were above me who were great in many things, but I always found out that I think I had better ideas than they had. And quickly, I also realized that, you know, having somebody who is a subordinate, you know, being smarter than you was always a threat to a lot of Nigerian bosses. So I tend to always just, you know, found ways to give them all the ideas and allow them be the ones to, you know, make the best use of those ideas. They never knew how to, you know, think through it. So they always call me, okay, Tunji, come and explain how we can do this. And I would go, oh, this is a fantastic idea. And I'll basically work through it. But I think what I've learned in the whole context is that we are all a community, um, dyslexic and non-dyslexic people, and it's that correct synergy in any organization that makes it really thrive. So in my organization, I've found the dyslexic people have, you know, so they're in my growth team. So I have a growth team. We're the ones that do the thinking. You know, I know this guy, there's this guy in my team, you know, if we wanted to name something or we wanted to give it a new design, he was the guy. And he doesn't work with communications, he doesn't work with design, he's in business development, but he's that guy. You know, just have him sit down and we're thinking, throwing ideas, he's not saying anything. And in like maybe 10, 20 minutes, he just comes up with this idea that blows everybody away. So we know him for that. So we always use him. Like anytime we're trying to think, okay, Michael needs to be in the room. So the idea really is that synergy and knowing that everybody needs to play their part in the team. This guys are the ideas people, these are the structure people, but that thing that brings them together is what really makes your organization, you know, extraordinary.
Oh, thank you so much for that. It's the structure, it's the enabling environment, it's seeing where the synergy is. And I guess, you know, that's also a strength that you've brought now at the leadership position. Again, coming back to the role of the leaders. Donna, what do you think about that? I mean, you work with training for organizations. How do you get organizations to take the training, to get educated about how to identify those strengths in the workplace and put them to good use?
I think for a lot of organizations, and I'm going to keep it real here, it's fear of being, you know, accused of discrimination and so on. I think, unfortunately, not all organizations are at this place that we're talking about this morning around appreciating, people's strengths and talents and so on. Some organizations, and quite a few of them actually, are quite scared that they are going to, be accused of discriminating against individuals through legislation and so on. So they will reach out in order to ensure that they are belt and braces around, the legislation, for example, here in the UK. Happily, what happens then is that they have a light bulb moment and realise, oh, actually, this isn't just about protecting ourselves. This is about getting the best out of individuals. And this makes perfect business sense because we want people to stay within our organisation who are super talented. We don't want people to leave us. We want people who are here firing on all cylinders and really playing to their strengths. So happily, sometimes it starts with almost a place of fear from the organisation, but it develops then into that realisation that this just makes perfect people sense and perfect business sense as well. And that's what then becomes really exciting, because then you see the organisation evolve, I think. And I think, a lot of the conversations that we're having here about valuing difference and celebrating difference, and people themselves, daring to reveal their differences and being confident enough to do that. Hopefully we'll have synergy in organisations where all those things will come together. The person themselves will want to share their authentic selves. The organisation is ready to receive that and actually knows how to get the best out of them as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. For an environment where there's legislation, I think it's helpful, like you said, to force everyone to start something to protect themselves. But in an environment like this, where we don't have legislation that applies, what would you recommend as the best way to broach that conversation? For us, we've struggled, to get a lot of organizations on board to train, to get educated about, dyslexia, to support employees. What would you recommend?
I think, it's a great question. I suppose we're very lucky in certain parts of the world. We do have legislation like that, which kind of pushes through sometimes organizations and commitments where there may be some reticence. I think for cultures where there maybe isn't that, it comes from people power, really. And it comes from this idea, and I jotted it down, this benchmarking, I guess, isn't it? It's comparing yourself to other societies, other organizations where, they are getting the best out of their workforce, and think, hey, maybe we're not doing that. So I think there is an element of comparison. I think it is about having awareness times like this where these conversations can happen, and then organizations decide that, yeah, this is good business sense, it's good people sense. As we think about 21st century working practices, and we are thinking about AI and technology, yeah, workforces, organizations need to bring their A game now in order to compete and to be very attractive as employers as well. There's a statistic I heard a little while ago, and this is across the world, that by the year 2030, 57% of our workforce will be made up of Gen Y and Gen Z. So these are the younger individuals coming through, and this is across the world. So it's only 7 years' time. And then I saw another part of that conversation saying around 50% of Gen Y and Gen Z identify as neurodivergent. So as we try to future-proof our organizations, this is really important as well if you want to attract the best of the best. So I think it comes essentially from people power as well.
I think, just recognizing that most of the people that are going to make up the workforce in a few years identify as neurodivergent is enough reason to start to position.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I'm going to ask you again about sort of bringing those skills to play. I know you talked about a lot of the answers organizations seek is from within them. But what do you think about the idea of sort of learning those ideas? I'm asking you before I ask Dr. Arnold the same question, because I know Diversity Lab does this. But, if you had an organization in our context that worked primarily with neurodivergent thinkers, how do you think organizations here would receive bringing those on as consultants in addition to technology consulting?
Okay, I'm going to be as blunt as humanly possible here. The bias runs deep. And I believe that language has been weaponized against the neurodivergent pattern of dyslexia. Words like disability, words like learning difficulty, these are all misnomers, in my own opinion. The starting point is to change the language and the way it is communicated and the way it is expressed to create that acceptance. The next level of that is to promote diversity programs, like at Deloitte. For example, we have a global diversity program where we explicitly engage with recruitment agencies for neurodivergent individuals that we deliberately and consciously bring into our teams. Because as a global firm, we recognize the value that that skill set brings to what consulting is. Thinking differently, creating solutions that no one else has seen. That is an explicit action driven off on the back of inclusion and diversity. Diversity fundamentally strengthens, and that is something we do deliberately. Another architect of this creation of diversity is agile practice. Agile practice requires you to assemble differently able people into teams to solve problems. That needs the most diverse base of people you can imagine orchestrating solutions in this team. So once those type of basic blocks are in place, then having an organization that now pushes more and more specifically identified individuals with this gift, that's the word I would use to describe dyslexia, would see a huge amount of adoption. But while the current mindset remains and the language is expressed the same way, why will I hire, in quotes, a disabled person if I don't have to, in quotes? But when the realization comes that dyslexics are not disabled, the fact that a fish or fish have orchestrated the landscape does not mean that birds are ill-equipped. They might not be able to swim as fast, but boy, can they fly. And that's the world that we are in. The fish, in quotes, normal people like us, in quotes, as they say, have to recognize that the superpowered people, dyslexics, are like the birds that can see higher, further, fly faster, and do amazing things that we, who can only swim, cannot do. But we, because we call the birds disabled for some strange reason, I don't know why that is, are intrinsically opposed to including them because of we don't want liability. But when the language changes to maybe alternatively abled or cognitively enhanced, whatever what language you want to use, it now becomes an attraction to say, I want people like that on my team. But in the absence of that, it's going to be very tough. Let me be very blunt to push that, especially in this market that also has a, in quotes, follow culture. Who else has done it? No. Okay, well, we'll wait until somebody.
Can I answer that?
Please go ahead.
One thing we found is we've been tapping into psychometric profiling. So a lot of companies do that, especially in their team building. So when they're team building, they're looking, people have got big, high vision, they see a bigger picture. Those who are very good at process, those are very good at motive aspects, and those are good leaders. And we've basically identified where certain skills of things, especially dyslexia, fits into that. So if you start the conversation, you flip it around and say, what you're looking for in this team is somebody who has this ability, this ability, this ability. Oh, by coincidence, that happens to be Johnny over there who's dyslexic. And by starting from that way around, we found there's been a greater acceptance. I think you're dead right. I've just written an article. I put a link in the chat yesterday about changing the language. It starts in schools. We condemn our children from day one with things like learning difficulties, special needs. I mean, I was classified as hyperactive at school, which just sounded like a superpower. Everyone was like, wow, Chris has got hyperactivity. Lucky him. My son, who's 7, has just been given ADHD, attention deficit a hyperactive disorder. I mean, we condemn our children. Of course, that language seeps through into employers. And so not surprising, as you said, they say, why would I want to hire somebody who's disabled, who's disorganized? They see all the bad stuff. They don't see the good stuff. And I think, in many ways, the education system has a lot to blame for that.
Yeah. I mean, that's really, really, honestly, really true, especially here. I think, even in our experience, we do see that even those who are open to the idea of dyslexic strengths and the real dyslexic edge, sometimes that narrative goes back to the remediation. It goes back to the deficit because we're trying to force that baseline that Donna spoke about earlier, take the place of the legislation that allows you to start from a point of fear. So people think, sometimes it's better to just stick with the narrative that says your kids are going to fail and not do badly if you don't identify who's dyslexic now. And then hope they see it from there. But actually, that is not also the way to bring out the strengths of dyslexia. With Diversity Lab, how do you see organizations embracing the value that you bring? How did you introduce the idea of sort of learning neurodivergent thinking?
Well, you've got to start at the top. I mean, at CEO level, our first target is those CEOs who are actually dyslexic because they get it straight away. Baines did a report, management consultant, that said that 76% or something of, always dubious of data that has 70% of anything, but 76% of senior executives, CEO, C-suite level, felt that their middle management were not innovative, were not thinkers, were not using their brain. That's not surprising that also most dyslexics leave companies at middle management level. They tend to leave because it's so linear, and they go off and start their own businesses, which is one reason that's been identified why dyslexics are very entrepreneurial. And so you have to have that conversation at very high up. Now, CEOs, they want talent. They want to embrace that talent. They need that talent. They need to be agile. They need to be competitive. And they benchmark themselves, as you said, against other companies. They need those talents. HR doesn't see it that way. Not at all. Unless you've got someone who's head of talent recruitment, and then they tend to be more open-minded to it. So we tend to talk at CEO level and look at basically we look at the company impact, and say, look, what can this do and how can it benefit you? And I worked with an insurance company a while ago who created an innovation department. They scrapped after 2 years. And I explained to the guy he just put the complete wrong bunch of people in there. They're all techies. What he wasn't getting was the people who were thinking, innovatively about engaging the customer and how to think more dimensionally. And when I explained something to him, he went, wow, I wish you told us that 2 years ago. Too late.
He finally got it. I mean, in the chat box now, someone's just talked about how in the US, no matter how you view dyslexia, the education system can only get government funding if dyslexia is classified as a disability. And it comes back to the language, what we're talking about, that language thing. Even with HR, as you've just said, Dr. Arnold, that idea of what are the KPIs, what's the language behind the KPIs that HR also has to seek talent, and not necessarily just to, recruit and keep to some budgets. Mr. Andrews, what do you think about managing employees who are dyslexic? They have these strengths. We can identify them, whether through psychometric testing or through working with, those in other cadres in the organization and communicating them to the leaders. But when they are identified, how do you think is the best way to nurture those strengths? I think you might be muted. Are you able to unmute yourself, Cindy Andrews? Oh, I think he's experiencing some.
Yes, I can. So could you say the question again? My earpiece just went a bit muddled up there. Sorry.
It's fine. So, we're talking about managing dyslexia in employees. And, earlier you talked about putting in the right structure and identifying talents that, where they're best applied. But practically, especially for general managers who may not have an understanding of dyslexia, what is the best way to create an environment where strengths of dyslexia can thrive?
I think that's why training is important. I don't think it's something that non-dyslexic people will notice if they had no training. I'm not sure it is something they would even come to appreciate if they had no training whatsoever. Because the sincere truth is that someone who is dyslexic and in an organization, especially the way most organizations are structured, and I'm talking to first, let's go to the traditional organizations, the brick and mortar. I'm not even talking about the techies and all the rest, the brick and mortar businesses. There is a certain profile that is required for you to climb the ladder. And that profile is hard work, structure, diligence, paperwork, and all those things. Now, it's not necessarily the things that most dyslexic people would thrive in. They would most likely be good at it, but not exceptional at, paper pushing and things like that. But it's in knowing that they are able to do certain things that the people who have that particular skill would never be able to do. But if you can't identify it, then there's no way that the organization will be able to take advantage of the strengths it has in dyslexic people. So for my team, I'll say this for my team specifically. So there's been many areas where I'd had to, step in. And it's not just in areas of dyslexia. I'm talking about in areas of general inclusivity and in areas of general showing of empathy. It's me being able to step in and insist that, no, we are an organization that will not let things like this slip or slide. And I generally feel that if you do not have it in your culture, you will miss those strengths. And like a speaker said earlier, that you put the wrong people in a department, in an innovation department, you're always going to get wrong things. They're only going to be trying to make the buttons quicker, the page to move from one page to another, make it faster. They're not going to think outside the box to be able to make something really innovative. So I think that's why training for organizations is super, super useful. But the lucky thing for my organization is I happen to be the one that is dyslexic. So it helps. It really helps. So I'm able to see it from that perspective. And a lot of the times when I'm able to move certain things in certain directions, people don't get it initially. After a while, everybody now sees, oh, so there was a person that we moved from a particular role to another. And I kept insisting that this guy needs to move to this role. Everybody didn't get it. He got it, thankfully. But then in his new role, he's been exceptional, and it felt like we were pretty much putting a bird into water to swim, in his previous role. While in this new role, he's flying and he's literally almost taking over my job, really. But it's really about knowing how to take advantage. But again, like I will go back to the conversation. If the organization isn't trained, there's nothing that you can basically expect from them. If the leadership doesn't know how to take advantage, you're pretty much wasting your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And there's something also that Amole, you put in here that is a crazy thought, but athletes get funded because of exceptional abilities in a specific narrow area. And maybe that's another mind shift that we need, rather than, we're not getting funding unless it's a disability. Is there a way that we can make the argument for, build a narrative for, and sort of drive support for the strengths that we need to create what we want, in the future? So thank you very much, everyone. I know we're a few minutes to 1 and we're fast running out of time. Thank you so much for this conversation. I've learned so much from it. I think the most exciting thing that I started with was that idea about technology sort of taking over from creative thinking and creative thinkers, and really seeing that at the end of the day, it's still the person, it's still the people, it's still the brain work that is important, and technology is an enabler at best at those. And the garbage in is still someone who puts the garbage in to get out what you want. So thank you so much for that. And also that the environment matters, that the openness and the nimbleness matters, that giving room for strengths to work as synergy is also very important. And that training is everything. I mean, without knowledge, where are we really going? So thank you so very much for all of your contributions today. Just before we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to add? Anything we didn't touch on that you'd like to add before we go?
Can I add one thing, actually? I think in UK especially, the broader term of neurodiversity has come about, and that embraces things like autism and many other things. And in many ways, it was a good idea at the time, but it's become actually more confusing to employers. Much more so, and now they bunch all of us all together in one bunch, and so you get almost the worst of it all, actually. And a lot of us are now moving away from that term neurodiversity, because although it's good to talk about diversities of thinking, it has become a bit of a negative badge for a lot of us.
Thank you very much. That's true. I think in the start, when we're beginning to understand something, we lump it all together, but as we gain more understanding, we should separate it to give room for it to thrive. And unless we do that, we're always going to see it as what it's not. I completely agree with that. Mr. Anything you'd like to add, Wally?
Yeah, I'll just want to say that this is a battle that we need to win, because especially as a nation, not just from a global, I'm talking about, I'm very, very, very selfish. I'm thinking about Nigeria. We need every advantage we can get. And a huge talent pool is being neglected as a consequence of a radical lack of understanding of the abilities of this pool. And talent is, if anything, talent is a strength of this country. And we have huge pools of talents that can do amazing things even on the global stage that we simply, as a nation, are not even thinking about. So, I mean, when I first had the conversation with you, Laide, I was like, my mind was blown as to how much we are missing, how much we are losing, how much of radical transformation, nation building that can be driven by people with the dyslexic ability. That is simply not happening. And we need to win this. Any initiative, any drive, anything that can create more of the awareness, push more of the agenda, it's a righteous battle that we really, really need to make happen. I'm being very selfish here. It's not about, I'm not even talking about the advantage to those who have dyslexia. I'm talking about the value from them. And it's too much to just let go, just like that, for no reasons. It's a waste, in my own opinion. But we can't let it continue like this for much longer. It's crazy. That's my own opinion.
Absolutely, I agree with you. It's a battle we have to win. And I think for many, even that idea that it's a battle feels like it's a long drawn journey, but it is a journey that is worth it. Donna, would you like to add anything before we go?
I suppose I'd just come back to this idea, building on what's just been said, that this is not a niche subject. I think there's about 1 in 5 of us who are neurodivergent. I know Chris maybe doesn't like that phrase, but this is not a niche issue. This is something, it comes down to almost a human rights issue, doesn't it? At a level of discrimination and so on, and a whole community of human beings who are being disenfranchised by society. I suppose just to add on to that, it's an interesting comment that's been said about the words we use. I feel that until the discrimination and misunderstandings removed, which is, I suppose, the foundation that the words are built on, we can pick whatever words we like and they will still end up discriminating and being misunderstood for the people those labels are attached with. I think the labels are a message that things are not quite right yet. So it's about challenging the emotion and the energy and so on that's around it, where those words evolve from, rather than just a cosmetic change of let's change the words and then everything will be okay, because it won't be. So yeah, I think it's really fascinating. So thanks so much for having me along. I've learned a lot and I've made some notes while the experts have been chatting as well.
Thank you very much for your contribution. And again, that thing about we have to be true to the cause and we have to be committed to making the actual change, not just a brushstroke, changing the terminology. Very important there. Tunji Andrews, anything you'd like to add before we go?
I'm just realizing that I took for granted that I'm dyslexic and I can see other dyslexic people in operations, and I've been able to take advantage of that in my organization. I think this is a call really for, greater training with more businesses to be able to understand, how to take advantage, because it's like you have superheroes in your business and you just don't know. It's like, they are really walking in the midst of you, and you're not taking advantage of the fact that you have superheroes there. And unfortunately, if you are not trained properly, you would never really be able to spot them. I can spot it because I'm one of them, so I'm able to spot another one down the road. So I think this is a call for more businesses to, get better trained, better to better understand why, people like this are supposed to be very useful in the growth of your business, especially in the areas of innovation, growth, large thinking, design thinking, and things like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Thank you all, everyone. I learned so much. I would love for us to continue the conversation. I'm sure we will. Thank you for everyone who listened and who shared questions that informed our conversation. Mr. Bernard, handing over to you now.
Oh, all right. Thank you, everyone. And just as we go, yes, definitely, Tunji and Drew. I think, like you said, superheroes who can recognize one another. From one superhero to another, it's probably one of the reasons why we've invited you multiple times to come to our TV station to say one thing or the other. So please don't get tired. It's a league of extraordinary superheroes. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to the panel moderators. Thank you to everyone who has been a contributor. And of course, to all those who have been watching, listening, and taking notes and writing questions. These questions have been attended to as in the course of the program, of this panel session. I beg your pardon. That has been happening. I know that there will be more questions. There will be more things to find out. Again, I was saying that the website we mentioned earlier, you can go there and get as much information as you want, get all the help that you need. If you're a teacher or a parent, you can definitely get from there. I'm talking about courses.dyslexianigeria.com. It's very helpful, very interactive. You will get most, if not everything, that you need. Once again, we'd like to say a very big thank you to everyone who has been a part of this 3+ hour session. And we do hope that the conversation will continue offline, and that not just this community, but the world, this country generally would see what it's lacking in this enormous pool of strength. Like one of the panelists did say, this enormous pool of strength that has not yet been adequately tapped. And that's one thing that Dyslexia Nigeria has been pushing to achieve. As we close, I'd like to call Dr. Adrian Tikolo to kindly give the closing remark, because I'm sure that she also has enjoyed this particular session. Dr. Adrian Tikolo, please take it from here.
Wow, what a time. I mean, it has been such an enlightening and engaging time. I hope everyone has enjoyed this webinar. I mean, I am blessed for it. As we come to the close of this third Dyslexia dialogue, I am overwhelmed with profound sense of gratitude and hope. This dialogue has been a platform for change, especially, a change in the language that we use to describe dyslexia. I mean, it's been a platform for recognizing the amount of potential that, we just let slip away every day that remains untapped. It has been a space where we've come together to explore the incredible potential that lies within the hearts and minds of individuals with dyslexia. I want to express our heartfelt appreciation to our remarkable speakers and panelists. Wow. Your expertise, your insights have been, illuminating, and our understanding has become all the better for it. Your dedication to making a difference in the lives of dyslexic children and the areas that you work is truly commendable. I also, extend our gratitude to all the educators, the parents, the advocates, and all the participants who have joined us today at this important dialogue and who have stayed till this time. Your presence and engagement have created a vibrant atmosphere of shared learning and collaboration. Together, we have taken a step forward in building a more inclusive world. So as we leave here today, let us carry the lessons from this dialogue into our schools, into our organizations, into our homes and our communities. Let us be champions of change, because change is needed. The advocates for recognizing and celebrating the strengths of dyslexic children. Let us be that change. Let us be the voice that raises awareness and inspiration and leads us to take action. Our work doesn't end with this dialogue. It's a beginning, a spark that ignites a movement. Let us continue to support and empower dyslexic students and adults, ensuring that their potential is not hidden, but unleashed and celebrated. I would also like to express my gratitude to the organizing team, our team at Dyslexia Nigeria as well, who have worked to make this event a success. Thank you so much. Your dedication is the backbone of our mission, and we're deeply thankful for your commitment. So as we leave here today, let us remember that dyslexia is not a disability. It's a unique ability. It's a different way of thinking. By embracing the power of strengths and unlocking dyslexia's hidden talents, we're sowing the seeds of a more inclusive, diverse, and compassionate society. Thank you for being a part of the third Dyslexia Dialogue from Dyslexia Nigeria. Together, we are making a difference. Let's continue this journey of empowerment and transformation. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. Do stay safe and best wishes, and do take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Adrian Coleman. Thank you to everyone who has been a part of this amazing 3 hours plus session. Just before we leave, I'd like to let you know that you can always contact Dyslexia Nigeria on all Instagram, all social media handles, on all platforms, and I'll read them out. On Instagram, it's Dyslexia Nigeria as one word. On Facebook, it's official Dyslexia Nigeria, all together as one word. On Twitter, or X as it's called now, it's Dyslexia.
Am I the only one who can hear him?
I can't hear you at all.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought I was the only one. We lost you.
No, we can't hear you, Bernard. Oh dear.
Oh.
Can't hear anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Are you there? You probably have to take all of that again.
Yeah.
A minute, please. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
My microphone ran out of battery power. So I'll quickly take this all over again. I was just saying thank you to everybody who has been a part of this. And I was reading out all the social media handles by which you can reach Dyslexia Nigeria. I start with Instagram. It's on at Dyslexia Nigeria for Instagram. For Facebook, it's official Dyslexia Nigeria. And then on Twitter or X, it's Dyslexia Niger. That's Dyslexia figure 9 and then JA at the end. And on LinkedIn, it's Dyslexia Nigeria. And the website is www.dyslexianigeria.com. Those are all the social media handles and, of course, the website by which you can reach Dyslexia Nigeria. And please don't forget, again, for those who are interested in learning, teachers, parents, anybody at all, you could go to courses.dyslexianigeria.com to get more information. I was going to wrap up, as I said earlier, with the national anthem, but because of dyslexia, I'm not sure I'm a very good singer, so I'll just keep that part and say once again a huge thank you to everyone who has made this possible. We hope that going forward, we'll have a larger community to inform and to educate concerning the potentials that dyslexics hold, not just to themselves, but to the entire nation and, of course, to the globe in general. Thank you once again. My name is Bernard Akede. It's been a pleasure being the moderator or the anchor of this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Everyone, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, my sis.
Maybe see you next year.
Thanks, Antonio.
Next year, can you fly us over to Nigeria so we can have a bit of a holiday as well?
It's
I've
happening.
not been to Nigeria yet. I'd quite like to go and visit.
Probably to Nigeria soon.